Hey, welcome everyone to this video. I hope you are doing well. In this video, we're going to take a look at importing hands into Adobe Animate. It's kind of like the second part of my hands video that I will link up there. So if you haven't seen that one, go ahead and take a look. Otherwise, we're going to go into the next step, which is taking our sketches for hands, bringing them into Animate, and how to connect those hands to arms and moving those around. Before we get going, let's go ahead and roll the intro. Welcome back everyone. We're gonna get right into it. So like I said before, I drew some hands and I'm gonna import them into Adobe Animate. And if we take a look here, I have my puppet, and to import an image, all I'm gonna do is go up to File, actually make sure that I'm on an empty layer. Let's rename that to Hand Sketches. And you can go up to File, Import to Stage, and you see here that Command R is the shortcut, or if you're on a PC, Control R. So click on Import to Stage, and I have it in the Downloads folder. Yeah, I have it named Fingers. So the first thing that I want to do is I want to make sure that it's the proper size. What you don't want to do is import these images or your sketches into Animate, and maybe your hand is about this big, but your puppet is this big. So then you're going to have to resize things, and then you have a lot of inconsistencies. So right off the bat, resize everything to be the right size, and then that way you don't have to worry about one hand being smaller than the next hand. And if you're switching, it's going to look weird, and then you have to resize everything, and trust me. So what I'm going to do is bring this down, and they all seem to be about the right size. I did that on purpose. Lock this down. Create a new layer. You see up here the plus sign. You don't really have to do this, but I'm going to hide everything except hand sketches and hands. And even here under hand sketches, I'm going to right click, drop down to properties, and make the opacity 50%. That way we can see what we're doing, what we're drawing, but still the outlines of the sketches aren't going to bother us as we're putting down outlines of the different hands. Switch back up to hands, and we're going to click Classic Brush, and we're going to drop down and go to Paint Normal. I'm going to zoom in, and if you notice, I have everything from the right hand, the left hand, the back side of the hand, and the front side of the hand. And before we get too deep into it, there's a couple things that I want to make sure are checked off. I'm going to go to the brush tool, come up here to the top right. I want to make sure that use pressure is turned on. If we have it turned off, we're just going to get a nice solid stroke. But if we turn that on, now we can actually see the thick and the thin of the lines that we're throwing down. And that's what I like. I like a nice pressure sensitive line. And another thing that we're going to make sure that we turn on is this object drawing mode. Let's say we're working on this thumb. I'm going to put this line down. And to make sure that I have consistent lines, what I'm going to do is draw through this line. So that way, I don't have to worry about getting perfect into there, even though that's not too bad. But what I like to do is draw through that line just so everything stays consistent in this intersection right here. But the problem is I'm going to have to come over here and erase, and I have to get, I've actually gotten a lot better at that. But you see, it's really subtle, but there's just a little wave in there. And sometimes what'll happen is you'll get this, and then the way to remedy that, you have to get the pointer tool and start pushing and pulling lines and trying to figure that out. This is a faster way of doing that. I'm going to delete those lines. Go back to the brush tool, make sure object drawing mode is turned on. Also, for the object drawing mode, it only works if you're using Paint Normal. So if you're using this technique where you're drawing through a line and it's not quite working, or the object drawing mode is not working, it's probably because you're in one of these other selections. If I draw this line, what happens is Animate will turn that into an object, and then I can come back with another brush, stroke, paint through that line. I'm going to zoom in. If I click, we see that these are still two separate objects. So now what I can do is come in here. If I double click, I can then grab the eraser tool, erase that, pop back out here, and we have our nice consistent intersection here. One thing to remember is select both of these lines, or even when you're done drawing the hand, select that line and hit Command B, and now it's all one shape. Quick little technique that I learned that brings a little bit of efficiency to what we're trying to do. So now that you guys know that technique, what I'm going to do is fast forward this part so you guys can see the drawing of the hands, but I mean, it gets boring after a while. So I'm going to fast forward. All right, see you on the other side. Now that I have these hands done, what I'm going to do is hit L for lasso, and I'm going to draw a circle around one of these hands. With it selected, I can go up to Insert, New Symbol, or as we see there, Command F8, and we get this dialog box that says Convert to Symbol. Here I'm going to enter hand underscore, which hand? It's our left hand, and what's it doing? It's making a fist. Hit OK. And I'm going to do the same thing for the other hand. Hit F8. Hand, which one? The right hand, underscore fist. And back to fast forward. We have two stacks, left hand, right hand. Now what I'm going to do is select all of the right hands and hit F8. We're going to name it hand underscore right. And do the same thing with the other side, F8, hand underscore left. Click OK. Now let's double click on this left hand stack. We're going to right click and distribute to keyframes. We don't need this one. Shift F5. And now we have all of our hands nicely displayed. And let's do the same thing with the right hand. Now we have both our hands set up. What I'm going to do now is click on one of these hands and hit Q. And Q is the free transform tool. And what we see is we get a series of handles and a little dot in the middle. And if we drag any of these black handles, you see that we can manipulate the size and the shape of the graphic that we're dealing with. Hit undo. Let's take a look at that little white dot in the middle. If we come to the outside of the shape, our cursor turns into a little tiny cursor with a rotation icon on it. we see that that little white dot is the center point for the rotation. I'm going to hit undo and I'm going to zoom in just a little bit. I'm going to take that little white dot and move it down to right about the wrist area. So when I go to just the outside and rotate again, now we're rotating on the wrist, on the axis of the wrist. Zoom back out and do it to this one. Move that down here. Move that around just to make sure that it looks okay. Perfect. And it's really important to do that at the very beginning. If you are dealing with one of these graphics and in the middle of the animation you decide to move that rotation point, it's going to make your animation act just a little bit crazy. So if that rotation point on your wrist is always going to be consistent with the entire animation, what you want to do is set that point up front before you start creating keyframes. That way you know what's going to happen. Now let's take a look at what happens if we add an arm. I'm going to move the left hand, and just to let you guys know, when I say left hand and right hand, I mean the left hand and right hand of the character that we're dealing with, not the left and right hand that I'm looking at. I always go off of what the character is looking at. I label these body parts that way, so if I ever hand off this file to someone else that's going to help me animate, they understand it's the character's left hand, not our visual right hand. What I'm going to do is create a new layer, and let's call this left arm. And I'm going to grab our rectangle tool, and let's say we have a blue shirt, and let's just real quick create an arm. And if we really wanted to get crazy, let's add the little shoulder there. Grab this, and I'm going to hit F8, arm, left, test. And the first thing I'm going to do is hit Q again and grab that little white dot and move it to right around. So if we rotate, now that's looking pretty good. And we're going to grab our hand, drag it up there, and rotate it just a little bit. Okay. That's good enough for our test, and just to get a little more creative here. So that's pretty good. Let's go ahead and delete these lines here. Go back to the top. I'm going to click on the left hand, and you see this hierarchy here. It says show parenting view. We're going to click that, and you see I already have some of these already parented. But what I'm going to do is grab the left hand, grab this orange square or orange rectangle, click and drag down to where it says left arm. And now when I click on the left arm, I highlight it and hit Q because I want to rotate it. Now the hand follows. But the powerful thing here is I can then also click the hand and rotate that independently. So I'm going to undo that a couple times. And now let's add some keyframes. What I'm going to do is come out to about 10, hit F6, which is a shortcut for new keyframe. Oh, and if you notice, this is another thing that you want to make sure that you click before you get started. If you notice, I created another keyframe and the hand switched on me. If I click on the playhead and drag to the right, we see that these hands are cycling through and that they're not lined up either. We're going to fix that here in a second. But the first thing that I want to do is I'm going to go ahead and undo until all these keyframes are gone. So if I click on the left hand and I go over to the properties panel, there's a little panel here called looping. Here's these three little buttons that we can click. play graphic and loop, we have play graphic once, and we have play single frame. That's the one that we want. Click on that guy. And now when we create a new keyframe, and now when we drag through, it stays the same hand. So I'm going to click on that, hit Q, drag up. Our hand is still where we need it to be. Perfect. And let's come over here, click on the arm, drag up. Go to the very first frame that I want this animation to begin on. Create classic tween. And once we get here, let's add another keyframe. Another keyframe there. And here, we just kind of want to rotate the wrist up just a little bit. And again, do classic tween. Come to the beginning. And if we drag to the right, we see that the arm comes up and the hand rotates. Very nice. So now let's go into that hand and fix all the misplacements. All we want to do is double click. This is another good reason to use onion skinning. So come up here to the two circles that says onion skin. We're going to click on that. Now we have this blue and green. Blue are the frames before the playhead, and the green are the frames that are about to happen. I just want two onion skin frames available, the one that's before and then the one that we're currently on, because in that way I can move the hand and place it. So now that we have all our hands in place and it looks good, let's say that this arm is going to rotate up and maybe throw the rock on, I guess, double horns. Let's do an F6 here, F6 here. And this is going to come way up. Quickly come down. And we can even, let's give it a little rubber bandy feel. That. If we look. Okay, so here I want the hand, instead of looking at me like this, I want to switch it. So what I'm going to do is click on that graphic symbol, click on this button that says frame picker, and this panel shows up. Now there's a couple things that I need you to keep in mind when you open up the frame picker. One, you have to make sure that the symbol that you're playing with is a graphic symbol. The second thing to keep in mind, if you have, say, thousands of frames in a graphic symbol and you open up the frame picker, Adobe Animate has to render out each one of those symbols in the frame picker. So be very careful. If you have a huge animation happening with your hands and those hands just, you have a lot of frames, it's going to bog down the application. So be careful with that. If you see that Animate is dragging real bad and you open up the frame picker, that's probably why. So right about here, I'm going to go ahead and throw up the rock on symbol. And when the arm comes down, I want to go back to the rock on symbol and rotate this up. And we can even reposition this a little bit. And again, click on that, rotate up. And since we're rotating those hands, what we need to do is create a classic tween. And now when we drag the playhead, it's going to go up, give us the rock on symbol, and then settles down, bounces a little bit, and settles in. Rock on! Yeah! Rock on! There we go. We created hands, we attached those hands to an arm, and we even animated the arm just a little bit so we could rock on! Yeah! There are other ways to animate arms. This is just using tweens. We're gonna cover a lot of the different ways, like actual frame by frame. There's a lot of animators that'll actually go through and draw each frame. This is more of a time saving and more of a using the application for what it's good at. But for now, I think we're good. We have an arm, an animated arm. We're switching hands using the frame picker. We're using classic tweens to finish it all up. We even learned a little bit about object drawing mode and how we can use that to make our process just a little bit more efficient. If you like this video, give it a thumbs up. If you know anyone that you think would learn something from this video, share it with them. And again, if you haven't yet, hit subscribe button and that little bell right next to it, so every time I come out with something new, you'll be alerted. I have a lot more tutorials and a lot more animations coming out, and I would love it if you would join me in this adventure. All right, everyone, take care. Rock on!